In the middle of the 20th century, the world entered a strange and unsettling era. Wars were no longer defined by marching armies or clear front lines, but by silence, suspicion, and shadows. The Cold War was fought not with constant explosions, but with fear, quiet, persistent, and deeply psychological. Two superpowers faced each other across continents and oceans, each convinced that the next decisive move would come without warning. A single miscalculation could erase cities. A single secret, stolen or lost, could shift the balance of global power. In that environment, paranoia was not a flaw. It was a survival instinct. Governments no longer asked whether something should be done. They asked whether it could be done before the other side attempted it first. Surveillance became an obsession. Listening, watching, recording, every conversation, every movement, every construction site was treated as a potential threat. But traditional intelligence had limits. Human agents could be spotted, spy planes could be tracked, satellites orbited too high to capture the smallest, most critical details. So intelligence agencies began searching for something else. Fear of being watched, fear of falling behind, fear of an enemy that was always one step ahead. Animals moved freely where humans could not. They crossed borders without passports. They entered secure spaces without suspicion. They were ignored, underestimated, dismissed as background noise in a world focused on machines and men. That is where an unsettling idea took hold. What if nature itself could be turned into a tool of espionage? The idea was not entirely new. Throughout history, humans had exploited the natural abilities of animals. Dogs tracked scents no human could perceive. Horses reshaped warfare for centuries. Even elephants once carried armies across mountains. But the Cold War demanded something different. It demanded precision, discretion, technology, and that meant pushing animals far beyond their natural roles. Inside classified laboratories and remote training facilities, scientists and handlers began experimenting with ideas that bordered on science fiction. Birds trained to deliver recording devices, marine mammals taught to interact with enemy vessels, small creatures modified to carry listening equipment no larger than a matchbox. To the outside world, these ideas sounded absurd. Inside the intelligence community, they felt logical. Decades later, much of what happened during this journalists and former agents. Until 2019. That year, the CIA released a large collection of previously classified documents. They were incomplete, heavily censored, and often frustratingly vague. But taken together, they revealed something extraordinary.
The CIA had not merely considered using animals for espionage. It had invested years of research, millions of dollars, and enormous manpower into making it work. These programs were not side projects. They were treated with urgency, seriousness, and institutional support. Some projects succeeded, at least on paper. Others failed spectacularly. Many ended quietly, abandoned once their limitations became impossible to ignore. But none of them were meaningless, because each one revealed something deeper about the mindset of an era defined by fear. Fear of being watched, fear of falling behind, fear of an enemy that was always one step ahead. Once the idea took hold, the question was no longer whether animals could be used in espionage. It became a matter of which animals and how far their abilities could be pushed. From the perspective of intelligence planners, the logic was compelling. Animals possessed capabilities humans did not. They could see in near darkness, navigate vast distances, and detect sounds and vibrations far beyond human perception. Most importantly, they blended into the world effortlessly. A man loitering near a military facility raised suspicion. A bird on a windowsill did not. A diver near a naval base triggered alarms. A marine animal swimming nearby appeared completely natural. For agencies obsessed with invisibility, this was an irresistible advantage. But there was a fundamental problem. Animals were not machines. They could be trained, but not programmed, conditioned, but not controlled. Inside the CIA, the Office of Research and Development became the center for these unconventional experiments. Its mission was not refinement, but exploration, pushing boundaries to see what might be possible. The first challenge was control. Animals did not follow orders like soldiers. They responded to instinct, conditioning, and reward. Training required patience, repetition, and constant adaptation. Failures were frequent. Birds refused to fly. Marine animals swam off course. Equipment was dropped, lost, or destroyed. Each failure carried risk. A lost animal could attract attention. A missing device could expose methods that had taken years to develop. Yet the programs continued, because the potential rewards were enormous. Imagine capturing detailed photographs of a secret yard ship without deploying a single aircraft. Imagine placing a listening device near an enemy conversation without sending an agent anywhere near the target. In some cases, early results seemed promising. Certain animals adapted in ways that surprised even their trainers. They learned routes, they responded to signals, they solved problems. This reinforced a dangerous belief that success was a matter of refinement, not limitation. But one animal would soon prove that assumption wrong. And when that happened, it exposed the illusion at the heart of the entire program.
Among all the animals tested by the CIA, one stood apart. His name was Duda. Duda was a raven, an unlikely candidate for espionage. Ravens were intelligent, but not predictable. They were not domesticated. They did not simply return home when released. But that intelligence would soon make Duda exceptional. By the mid-1960s, the CIA had launched a program to train birds to transport surveillance devices. Testing took place on San Clemente Island, off the coast of California, chosen for its harsh conditions and unpredictable winds. Most birds struggled. Then there was Duda. Instead of following fixed routes, Duda adapted. He adjusted his altitude based on wind conditions, conserving energy and optimizing his flight path. While most birds struggled to fly short distances, Duda flew more than 3 miles and returned. As training intensified, new dangers emerged. Wild birds began attacking the trained ravens. Many were injured or killed. Duda adapted again. He climbed beyond the reach of seagulls. He engaged hostile ravens in brief aerial confrontations, leading them away from shore until they gave up. It was planning, not instinct. Trainers realized they were no longer conditioning an animal. They were working with an intelligence. Ravens could recognize landmarks, remember locations, and distinguish specific objects. This led to an extraordinary operational concept, a raven delivering and retrieving listening devices from specific windows. On paper, it was elegant, invisible, low risk. In reality, it was fragile. Training took years. Environmental noise often ruined recordings. Success depended on variables no one fully controlled. Still, the program continued because Duda kept succeeding. Until one day, he did not return. During a training flight, Duda was attacked by 2 wild ravens. All 3 disappeared from view. Duda was never seen again. A handler later wrote that he was in a class in himself, a rare expression of grief in intelligence records. His disappearance marked a turning point. If even the most intelligent animal could not be reliably controlled, what hope was there for the rest? If ravens represented intelligence, pigeons represented reliability, or so the CIA hoped. Pigeons had been used in warfare for centuries. They were predictable. They always found their way home. By the 1970s, the CIA needed high-resolution images of Soviet shipyards in Leningrad. Satellites and spy planes could not provide sufficient detail. Pigeons could. Flying low over a target, pigeons could capture images no satellite ever could, day or night, in almost any weather. The CIA developed miniature cameras and harnesses specifically for the birds. Each flight could produce hundreds of photographs. But pigeons followed instinct, not missions. To improve accuracy, trainers developed the ABC flight method. Point A, the release point. Point B, the target. Point C, the home loft. Conditioning improved success rates, but only to a point. Birds were lost. Some were killed by predators. Others disappeared with expensive equipment still attached. Even fully trained pigeons completed missions successfully only about 1 out of 4 times. This was not precision espionage. It was probability. One planned operation involved releasing pigeons near Soviet shipyards using creative concealment, coats, bags, even modified cars. The documents do not confirm whether the operation ever took place. The lesson, however, was clear. Animals could sometimes deliver extraordinary results, but they could never guarantee them. If birds were fragile, the CIA believed dolphins might be different. Dolphins were intelligent, social, and capable of operating where human surveillance was weakest. the sea. In 1964, Project Oxyus was launched to test whether dolphins could place devices on enemy ships. Early demonstrations were promising, but secrecy surrounded the program, and parts of the documents remain heavily redacted. As training progressed, limitations emerged. Dolphins bonded strongly with handlers, making field deployment difficult. Long-distance reliability was inconsistent. By 1967, the program shifted focus, then quietly disappeared from records. It had crossed a line, from observation to direct involvement in warfare. No CIA animal experiment is more controversial than Acoustic Kitty. According to the CIA, it was a technical experiment, never deployed operationally. According to former insider Victor Marchetti, it was something far darker. Marchetti claimed the CIA surgically implanted listening equipment into a cat, attempting to control its impulses electronically. He alleged the cat was deployed and killed by a taxi during its first mission. The CIA denies this account. The documents remain heavily redacted. What is certain is this: Acoustic Kitty represented the moment when experimentation crossed from training into transformation. A living creature turned into a platform. After that, references to animal programs rapidly declined. By the 1970s, the CIA turned away from animals, not because ambition faded, but because control proved impossible. The final experiment was mechanical, the Insectothopter, a dragonfly-shaped drone. It worked in theory. In practice, even light wind made it useless. With that failure, the era of animal espionage quietly ended, but the instinct behind it did not. Today, modern programs explore surveillance in new forms, driven by the same desire to see without being seen. The story of animal espionage is not about birds or dolphins or cats. It is about what happens when fear drives innovation faster than wisdom can keep up. And it leaves one final question. Because history suggests that when fear leads, limits tend to disappear. If intelligence agencies once turned nature itself into a tool of surveillance, what limits, if any, remain today?